Here's Marco Arnaldo filming from GenCon 2015. I'm here with Chris, who has agreed to tell us about Aetherium, which is a miniature game, and it is a new or newish release, right, Chris?
Yeah. So we're Anvil 8 Games. We're a new company. This is our first game. Some of you probably kept up with the Kickstarter last year, and the game just got released back in April at Adepticon over in Chicago. This is our first year at GenCon. We're very excited to show the game off. So I want to explain a little bit to everybody what we've got. Like Marco said, it is a combination of a board game and a miniatures game. If you're new to mini games, it's a great way to get started because there's not a lot of models. The models are fairly simple to put together and assemble, and there is not a lot of financial investment either. The core
that's
box,
kind of important.
Yes, yeah. You know, I've been a big gamer myself for years, especially a lot of mini games. So I understand, you know, some of them you got to spend a couple $100 to get started. Not the case with Aetherium. The core box is $100, and it comes with what we consider a full game. If you're more of a board gamer, it is a full game in a box. And if you're more of a miniatures gamer, we've got some really slick-looking models and a very easy-to-learn game that has simple mechanics, but it's also very deep when it comes to the layers of strategy and things like that. So why don't we take a look at the game down here, and we'll show you what you got. So Aetherium takes place within a virtual reality. It is a game kind of akin to the Matrix, where the models on the board represent the programs that your users are running through the system. Mankind kind of developed and also discovered the Aetherium, and now most of humanity spends their time there because it's very manipulative and malleable. People can kind of make the paradise that they want and not have to live with the daily drudgery of their lives and their terrible office and factory jobs. So humanity's consciousness has shifted a lot into the Aetherium. Of course, with all things, conflict has erupted, and there are two factions we currently have available. One is called the Aetherium, which is a police state that is all about controlling the system and keeping it for their own ends and keeping their population under control. Their naturally opposing faction is called the Nanime. They are a rebel anarchist faction that some people akin to terrorists because they're willing to do whatever it takes to keep the system free. So down here we have a game in progress. This is just a demo game. This isn't the full set. So the main part of the game is that we have this blue board here, which is called the quantum noise. This represents the raw, uninhabited part of the system that mankind has yet to tame. It is very toxic to the human consciousness and can cause tremendous damage to your programs, so you try to avoid it at all costs. What mankind has done is they've created these devices called pylons and nodes, which help keep up a safe bubble or a safe zone in the quantum noise. The safe zone is represented by these tiles, which are called schemas, and they come in 3 sizes. The schemas are where your programs can inhabit without taking damage, as it kind of keeps the quantum noise at bay. One of the interesting mechanics of our game is that during the game you can spend your resources to move the board around. So you can bridge the gap by shifting tiles around the board or by completely rotating them and changing the layout of the battlefield. For anybody who's a miniature gamer, you'll understand how crazy or of an advantage or disadvantage that can create in a game. All of a sudden, you have a model that's back here that thinks they're safe, and I could turn this around and then pull this to me, and now I'm able to attack and get in range, and I haven't even moved my units yet. The game itself has very simple mechanics. When you make an attack, you'll normally roll 3 of the custom dice, and you have to try to match the symbols that are on every unit's data card. The more symbols that you match, the more damage that you will cause. Every unit, when it attacks, also has these other symbols, these little gears called disruptions. If you roll enough of them on your card, you will trigger your disruption power. All of these powers are additional effects that take place in addition to whatever damage you cause. Some of them do ongoing effects like fire, or you can teleport enemies around the board, or things of that nature. When you're attacked, every program has a safeguard ability that triggers. These are defensive powers that activate when you're attacked, and they do all sorts of things from causing status effects to reducing damage, making yourself harder to hit, things of that nature. One of the cool things is that every single program in the game has unique powers and abilities, so nobody really has anything the same that what another program does. The game uses an action point based system, so you'll notice on the cards here that every single model has a CS value, which is called your cycle speed or your connection speed. That is how many action points you have to move around the board. So in the case of this model, Mastrona, she could spend 6 action points to move 6 spaces around the board. The tiles themselves have terrain printed on them in the form of these symbols. So instead of having 3D terrain or having to build your own table, it's simply on the tiles. The tiles are double-sided, featuring 2 different scenes with a nice mixture of different terrain that makes the game very simple and easy to understand in that regards. And then the other thing that a program will use its CS for is to activate its .exe abilities or its executables. Some of these are passive and are automatically in effect. Others will have a CS value associated with them to use. The cool thing about the game is that you can use and do your actions in any order. So if a program had enough CS, it could move, use a .exe, attack, and continue moving, or any sort of thing. Attacking does not cost CS. Every program normally gets to make 1 attack. Although certain programs have abilities to do other attacks and things of that nature. And a normal game will have 5 programs. For the demo, we only have 3 set up, but our programs come in 3 types. You'll have an avatar, which acts as your commander or your general. They're the named characters of the game and have all sorts of interesting abilities. They also supply you with the resource of the game, which is called RAM. As long as your avatar is on the table and alive, you get RAM. If they die, though, you lose the RAM, much akin to other resource management games that have that kind of ability or mechanic. Some of the other programs here, there are functions, which are your solo one-man units. In a normal game, you will have 2 functions, and they act as single models that, while not as powerful as an avatar, can still hold their own. And finally, you will have subroutines, which act as your squads, and you will have 2 subroutines in a normal game as well. In this case, the Praetorians right here are one of the subroutines that we have in effect. Subroutines, they're weaker, they're lesser-minded hackers, or they have crappier hardware or devices to hack into the system, so they band together to work together in the game as a unit. Subroutines come in 2 types. The Praetorians, for example, are a linked program, which means that they work together as a traditional mob, and they will move around the board together and fight together. The Riot Girls, on the other hand, over here, they are what's called a segmented program. Each of their models gets to move independently during their turn, and so you have basically 3 lesser models making up a group. A typical game of Aetherium will last up to 5 turns or 5 calibrations in which players will alternate their activations. We have what are called program activation decks, and these cards here, you have 1 for each of your programs. During the game, players will organize these in whatever order they like, and on your turn you'll draw your top card, and that's the program that activates. When that program is finished, the opponent does the same thing, and you alternate. This keeps the game moving really fast. You don't have to sit around for 20-30 minutes while your opponent wipes your models off the table.
That helps.
And it keeps things going. A typical game lasts about 45 minutes to an hour. It's a 2-player game. You can certainly add more players, but the game starts to take a little longer at that point. So the game is more designed for 2 players. The rule book itself, we'll step over here. He shreds. The rule book itself has 6 different scenarios in it that allow for different objectives and different layouts.
So you need to change the angle just because we get all the glare from the lamps.
Can we see there now? Here, let me step on this side. How about
like more perpendicular, exactly.
Like
Perfect.
Okay.
Is the glare from the ceiling is killer. Thank you so much.
So our book is fully colored in the rule book. We've got tons of cool art. There is backstory about the game. There are different scenarios to play, and in the very back of the book, we have the rules for every single program in the game. So even though you don't get all the models in the core box, you at least have the rules. You can try stuff out. You don't need to buy anything until you test it out and see for yourself it's something you want to add to your army, rather than having that kind of regret by like, this unit isn't my style.
So you could make your replacement unit your unit and then play with the rules that are explained there, and then say, I really like the rule and I would like to have the model for that unit.
Exactly. This right here is what comes in the core box. For those of you that have not seen a box, this is what it looks like. Typical game size box that we have here. And
so
again,
not this question, but models come
painted, unassembled and unpainted.
Unassembled and unpainted, okay?
So if you're a mini gamer, you're used to this. They are resin models. Most of them are 2 or 3 pieces. We've tried to make things as simple and new player friendly as possible. If you're into board games and this is your first foray into miniatures, you can see here this model is only 1 piece. A little bit of cleaning and assembly, a little bit of painting, and you're good to go. As you can see, the core set does not come with a tremendous amount of models. I think there's about 20 or 30 models. So it's easier for a new player to get in as well. If you're new to miniature games, buying the core box alone is more than enough to get started. And again, you can add on models at your own pace and as you see fit.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for taking the time to tell us about Aetherium.
Thank you for having us.